these applications at the end of the day, at least in those days, probably nowadays is different with the whole AI situation, are read by assessors. So, and this sort of links with today's approach to grants. If you're going to put ChatGPT to do your storytelling, you guarantee you're not going to get the grant because it's a story. Your grant application needs to be written in a way that an advisor will grab it. I was like, oh, I want to read more. Like if it's just generic text of solving a problem that everybody knows exists, it's just, oh yeah, whatever, another one for the pile. You need to captivate the audience. And your audience is the grant advisor that is reading your application, and needs to be written in a way that captures their imagination and their thoughts. And it's like, oh, this is really interesting. Yeah, these guys need the money to fulfill this project. Otherwise, you just don't pass the filters.
Hello and welcome to the Hardware Podcast. I'm Dilly, Satharasinghe, and in this podcast, we talk all things hardware, from design and prototyping to funding, manufacturing, and commercialization. And today, I'm joined by my co-host, Michael Korn. Together, we go beyond the build to uncover the stories, struggles, and breakthroughs of the people shaping the next generation of physical products. And this show is brought to you by Blue Garage, where basically everything you need to design, prototype, and build is right here under one roof. And Silent Flaps, your plug-and-play engineering partner for physical products. Michael, over to you.
Thanks. And this episode, we're joined by Daniel Becerra, who's an old friend of mine and co-founder of BuffaloGrid and some other interesting startups that we're going to hear about. BuffaloGrid was on a mission to remove the barriers to internet adoption by providing free power to charge mobile devices and digital services that would connect the next billion. Welcome to the pod, Daniel.
Thank you.
Great to see you. And I think a nice way to start would be just to tell us your story of you getting into invention, being a hardware founder, entrepreneur, and what led you to BuffaloGrid, and maybe a little bit about what you're doing now. This is the journey of your past 15 years, I think.
Super. So, well, yes, I'm originally from Mexico. My background is in industrial design, and I came to the UK to do my master's in innovation design and engineering, which is where I met you, and a few other people that will come along in the story as we progress. So at the RCA, at the Royal College of Art, during this course, in second year, you will do a group project and a solo project. The group project for me was a substitute for air conditioning, and we developed a device using phase change materials will give you 90% of the efficiency of an aircon with 5% of the energy consumption. After graduation, we started a company. 2 years down the line, we exited. We sold it to a large holding, then commercialized the product. So from a student project to an exit, it was just around 3 years, which was like a fascinating story. And like when we sold that company, it was just like, oh, let's just do it again. And that after that exit, I met with another RCA graduate, Andrew Storty, whose solo project was about coffee roasting. And he got investment from a guy called Phil Schluter, who is a coffee trader. And he and his family had been trading coffee across sub-Saharan Africa for over 150 years. He will be the guy going to all these nations across the equatorial side of Africa where coffee is growing, and saw how mobile phones were penetrating these regions. And I mean, we're talking about 2011, 2012. So we're still sort of on the Nokia 1100s that were across Africa, using by farmers and benefiting from the connectivity that they will provide. But one thing that he saw was how difficult it was to charge. In those days, it was very common to see a farmer traveling an hour and a half just to charge their phones. So he asked Andrew to create a prototype of the idea that he had to solve this problem, which was a bicycle generator. The idea being cycle around, everybody across these regions are on bikes. So if you cycle around, you create enough power that you can store into a battery and then charge phones for your peers.
It was basically Daniel, was just to be clear, it was like the idea was that you would cycle to a village, then you would like lift up the back wheel and your bike would become the generator to charge the phones. Is that correct?
That is correct. Exactly. So Andrew built those prototypes for Phil, but he was in the middle of building his own company, which is Ikawa, which is actually hosted with you guys. You will know more about that. And he asked me, well, Daniel, if you...
Ikawa is one of is Blue Garage's, I think, longest standing members. So they've got their R&D facility here and their production facility and their office. And it's amazing to see. This is a business that I knew 15 years ago in the Royal College of Art. We went our separate ways. We had our own factories. And then we realized that it's much better to share space rather than have that commitment of having to pay the rent and long-term lease. If we share the facility, it could be better for both of us. So essentially that relationship with Andrew Stordy is what started Blue Garage.
There you go. Well, that relationship with Andrew what started BuffaloGrid as well. So I took those bicycles off the hands of Andrew for him to concentrate on Ikawa. And I went to Uganda. Uganda was the first place where we tested. And it was really interesting because as a product, it worked. You needed to cycle about 4 hours to generate enough power to charge about 20 to 30 phones. And in those days, 20 to 30 phones, the normal cost of that will provide you with like twice as much income as you will earn as a farmer. So the thinking behind the very simplistic unit economics of that, it was like, well, work half the time, earn twice as much, was not to like. But as soon as we landed in Uganda, we realized that there were so many problems. Number one is just like, you cannot cycle 4 hours a day every day of your life. Even a Tour de France athlete will do that. So we gave these bicycles to local entrepreneurs that were keen to test them. And a week later, they were giving those back. It's like, thanks, but no thanks. But when they had their batteries charged, there were queues to charge their phones. So the need was there. The need for charging the phones was there. The solution wasn't quite right. So that started a whole journey of bringing initially power as a service to these communities. We quickly moved into solar panels. So what's the point in exercising for so long if energy is literally falling from the sky? And I guess that's probably when we secure our first funding. So our initial angel funding was to develop these solar units that we will be deployed back in Uganda again.
Before we, I think, get into the crowdfunding, I'm actually curious to understand, from the idea with the bicycles to developing solar. How long did that take? What was the timeline there for that pivot?
Very short. So, I mean, the bicycles literally were given to me. So Andrew, I don't know how much he spent on those, but I had them one day ready to go. I test them for like a couple of weeks just to make sure that, I mean, obviously they did what they're supposed to do. And then I went straight to Uganda. By the time I came back, we got our initial funding through the Innovation RCA. And then, I guess it was probably 9 months. 9 months before we were back in Uganda with solar units. Again, really handmade prototypes. In a sort of with that mentality of just make something and test quickly. It's not, don't go to manufacture it, don't try to invent the wheel again. It's just like create something, put things together, in a robust way that you can test. And we built 5 units that we went back to Uganda with. And those 5 units were quite successful. I mean, we were charging phones. What the other important thing was the management. So with the bicycles, as soon as I left Uganda, there was no one to fix them or solve them, or you couldn't tell how well they were performing. That was it. So that was an insight of saying, okay, what we need is a device that is connected that can tell us how well it's performing and all that sort of stuff. So from our offices in London, we were able to tell, okay, well, each unit is charging 25 phones, is generating this amount of power. This day it didn't work. And all that was just through SMS. So in those days, my business partners were 2 RCA graduates, Stefan and Damon. And yeah, we put all this remote management system together. And so that also provide us with enough traction to prove, like, look, on a daily basis, we're charging hundreds of phones, because there's these little 5 units, each of them charging 20 odd phones. You can see the traction, the need, the live data of the need in those regions. And that sort of was critical to get us more funding, to increase the narrative, to provide a better product and a better service.
So what was the next stage? How did you get that like, how much funding did you receive in order to develop those 5 units and then get that knowledge?
We're talking about, I think the first check was £100,000.
Is that from Innovation RCA?
No, that was a mixture. That was a mixture of RCA and angel investment.
And then what happened after that? Because then you found something that had real traction, potential.
Yeah, one of the mistakes that we did, I mean, when I see the journey in retrospective, I don't have any regrets. It was amazing, and it had to be done the way it had to be done. But we did a lot of small iterations, very costly, and very costly in a cap table manner of speaking. So we went to another angel round and we got another 100,000, and we did tweaks and tweaks and tweaks. And then we got another angel round. So we spent like 3 years probably with 3 angel rounds of a few £100. No, like each check was £100,000. We raised like £350,000 over 3 years. Nowadays, you just go and raise a seed round of a couple of million and just go straight into the deep side, right, of the pool. In those days, we were just iterating. The thing that was against us was the rapid penetration of mobile phones. So by the time we were just charging phones, the internet was starting to arrive to these regions. So how can we provide internet services to enhance the digital connectivity of these users? And then the internet become available all across. And then it was like, well, what do we do next? And that's when we move into streaming services. So it was a very interesting journey of constant innovation to provide better services for our users. And then we wanted to talk about grants. Each grant allows us to get to the next stage. So our very first large grant was Innovate UK Smart Grant, which was precisely to add the internet connectivity part of things to our units.
Daniel, you mentioned constant innovation, right? So being an early stage founder myself, basically I'm from Sri Lanka, right? Came here like 3 years ago. And back in Sri Lanka, we used to constantly, come up with new ideas and just constantly build stuff. But what I found was that there's a lot of anxiety, there's a lot of panic when you are pivoting as an early stage founder. Obviously, there's that fear that's associated with the finances, but also it's just sort of this feeling of, what if I fail? Like, is this failure if I were to pivot this much? Did you feel the same, or maybe you didn't? But how did you sort of battle those type of emotions? I suppose.
I guess, like I was younger than I am today. I wasn't married. So like when we started Arctica Technologies, the first company, um, I had spent 2 years as an overseas student in London with no money whatsoever. Like I remember living on £80 a week in those college years. Like I would work the Saturdays with my uncle in a furniture shop, and he would pay me 80 quid for the weekend, and that would keep me going for the whole week. So obviously in no luxury whatsoever. So like when we graduated and we got a little bit of funding, like all of a sudden paying ourselves £1,000, I remember £1,000 a month was like, I'm a millionaire. But I wasn't. It was still a super low salary in London. And
Daniel, my first paid gig from the Royal College of Art was with you.
yes,
It was building the playground for
yes.
class.
And I remember I getting
Yeah.
£100, and
That
it was like a godsend.
fucking huge. I felt like £100 for hanging out with Daniel for a day. This is great. We could do this more. So it's that freedom of having such low expectations but loving what we're doing that I think enabled us to go on what other people would perceive as a risky journey of startup. But for us, it was just, wow, we can get paid to do what we want to do. This is amazing. It's two
And of
different
course, you
ways of
didn't
looking
need
at it.
to pay for kids and hospital bills or anything like that. So like there wasn't that much need for money, as long as you were able to feed yourself and have fun. It was all it takes. So that lasts for a while, and so that, I guess that's the answer to your question. There wasn't the need for much money, so the risk was enough to, like, there was enough rewards to take the risks.
Absolutely.
And then as things progress, then you start getting more. Well, I remember BuffaloGrid was a part-time gig for years for me. So like I co-founded, all of us were part-time. Funny enough, I started another company, which is the furniture company that I co-founded with my investor. My first investor in BuffaloGrid, Alejandro, really liked the way I was running BuffaloGrid, and he said, "Well, I always wanted to start a furniture company. Will you help me set it up?" And I did. I worked with him probably 3 years, part-time, Buffalo part-time H, and H still going. H.com, check it out, lovely furniture. We did very cool projects like the embassy in Korea for the UK government, and then there's a lot of projects in Mexico as well. So then it wasn't until 2016 that we got a Crowdcube round where we raised sort of our first big check. After all these rounds, small rounds of angel investment, we got a $500,000 from Crowdcube, which was the moment that, this is the main gig. I became full-time employee of BuffaloGrid, and we get things going.
That's one.
Yeah.
So, look, speaking of funding, like I said, as an early stage founder, so we are currently bootstrapped and exploring crowdfunding, right? So, based on those three options available to get started for anyone, if either you go the bootstrapped route or VC or grants. So, based on your experience, what would you say to an early stage founder today exploring among these three options?
I'm on the other side, I'm a big fan of VC funding. But it all depends on what your offering is. At the end of the day, VCs are in the game of exits. And like, currently we're raising funding, and you see within their requirements, your company needs to have an exit potential of £250 million. Otherwise, it's not worth the risk. They're in the business of investing in a lot of companies, and one of them will have a massive exit that will make their funds viable. So there's so many successful businesses that are doing extremely well, but they will never reach a 250 million exit. And for those kind of businesses, the VC route is not the right one. And that's why it's called venture capital, right? Your company needs to be a venture. If it's a small business, it can be extremely successful business, but it might not have the venture potential. Then grants, which is I guess part of the main topic of today, are extremely good, but the ecosystem of grants have changed quite a lot, and I think that has to do also with the volume of startups that currently are, and the sectors. So we were really lucky with BuffaloGrid to be in the energy sector, which is one of the most funded things, and also you will know, Michael, with the health sector. So if you're in health, if you're in energy, across the UK, Europe, and even the US, the grant opportunities are endless. Literally, like you can just Google and will find endless options for grants. So obviously, it's a good approach to reach those and try to see whether their criteria fit with your roadmap. Any other industry is much more harder. Like Innovate UK currently, well, during my time, and I think it's been rebranded, but it's still the same principle, have the smart grants, which are open across sectors. You don't need to be in energy, you don't need to be in health. They're open sector-wise, but the amount of applications they get is just enormous. So to be successful nowadays with a smart grant application, it requires, well, obviously an amazing application and a little bit of luck. So it is very, very hard to rely on grants at this stage for new companies.
Well, yeah, I wonder, like, what advice would you give for someone they're starting a hardware business? Okay, it's not a 250 million exit. I think a lot of people think that they're VC fundable, but it's just not even worth starting that conversation. Who knows? Maybe after a few years of building the business, they could discover that they are, but at the early days, they're not. And maybe they're not in the energy or health sectors, or they're not in one of the sectors that is on the government agenda. Have you come across businesses like that? And what sort of advice would you give them?
Yeah. Well, I when we were particularly successful with grants, to the degree that our venture capital fund asked us to keep chats to other companies about it and stuff. And one of the things that I always said, and this is again before the days of ChatGPT, like today you can literally put together an application in a day with ChatGPT, right? However, that doesn't guarantee you it's going to be a good application. So what we used to do, and I think that is still a good advice, is to create your asset library. And this is your classic blurb of 100 words, 500 words, 3 pages long, having different lengths of detail for what you do, the unique economics, the need, the solution, the market opportunity, all those bits and pieces. And you keep updating those. So one thing about grants, and I hear a lot of times, is that they're quite time consuming. Yes, they are time consuming. And the applications are long and tedious, but at the end of the day, you get in hundreds of thousands of pounds without any equity request, which is amazing if you can get them. So once you create these asset libraries, you will find yourself doing a few applications, and they always ask the same thing. What's your solution? What is the problem addressing? Who is your user? So if you have all those assets ready to go, and again, in different formats, they always will have like 400 words, 2,000 words, 100 words. You can just copy paste and have them always ready to be used, always updated, because as you progress with your venture and your business, these things change. So if you have them up on the ready, this becomes much easier. Because also grants, it's a little bit of like shooting with a shotgun. You need to apply to 10, to 20 to get one. So if you have all these sets available, then it's much easier to apply to 20 grants than just focusing on one large application. But the main advice also is to never adjust your roadmap to the grant. Like the grant will tell you, oh, we're looking for these solutions. And you can think, oh, this is something that we could do. If it's not in your roadmap, never follow that route, because then grants become a distraction and the money that is given is never enough to pay the opportunity cost of that distraction. So you should always apply to grants that completely align with your roadmap.
Yeah, and I mean, from my perspective, sometimes even applying for a grant that's on your roadmap, by the time you start the project or you're halfway through the project, you've learned a lot more. You maybe want to pivot, but a big grant will tie you in to deliver on what you said you had to do at the beginning. And so even that can restrict ironically, the ability for the startup to be innovative.
Yeah. The other thing that is really interesting, we were successful. We probably the largest grants that were available in those days, and probably still are, which are the European Commission grants. So we got over £2 million from the European Commission. And one very interesting insight that I got from a lady that was helping us with the grant was that these applications, at the end of the day, at least in those days, probably nowadays is different with the whole AI situation, are read by assessors. So, and this sort of links with today's approach to grants. If you're going to put ChatGPT to do your storytelling, you guarantee you're not going to get the grant, because it's a story. Your grant application needs to be written in a way that an advisor will grab it and say, oh, I want to read more. Like if it's just generic text of solving a problem that everybody knows exists, it's just, oh yeah, whatever, another one for the pile. You need to captivate the audience, and your audience is the grant advisor that is reading your application, and needs to be written in a way that captures their imagination and their thoughts. And it's like, oh, this is really interesting. Yeah, these guys need the money to fulfill this project. Otherwise, you just don't pass the filters.
Daniel, very interesting stuff, honestly. So, correction. So, you've obviously had a lot of success with grant finding, right? So, all wins usually come with, fear failures. So, were there any mistakes that you did, or any regrets, or any learnings that could potentially help another early stage hardware founder today?
I guess, well, sort of that alignment, that when you grab a grant that is not aligned to your roadmap, that was a learning from experience. We did make that mistake of applying for a grant that had sort of a different, it was an energy access. We were completely focusing on like 80% of the grant, but like they were asking for another bit of innovation, which we thought, oh, we could do something that would align with our roadmap to match this grant. And it actually didn't, and it was that distraction. So that was a learning. But also, I guess it's so making sure that the finance management of the grant is completely understood and under control. Because again, you might think that, okay, I'm just spending the money in my roadmap, and it will be fine. But they're so picky with the parameters. It's just like, well, you're not allowed to spend money on this. You're not allowed to spend money on that. And all of a sudden, you might have like a £250,000 budget that is given for your grant, and you spend it all, but you realize that only 150,000 is claimable, and then there's £100,000 gap, and so you need to be very aware of where and how you spend the grant money.
I'll tell you a quick screen story. We got a big grant, we had a big team, and we delivered, 80%, but there was more to do, but then the grant finished. And so we continued. Like, that cost us a huge amount, because we kept on this team that essentially wasn't a viable team in the business, but we wanted to finish off the R&D project. And that was like, you have to quickly realize when the business is being funded externally or when it is actually an internally viable funded thing. And that cost us pretty heavily, because you can quickly behave like a big company when you're not actually a big company. You've just got this like fake injection of short-term money.
Perfect. So I know we can keep talking about this because it's a very interesting conversation, Daniel. So actually, Michael and I, we caught up this morning, and one of the things Michael said was Daniel's a brilliant storyteller. I can see that in action because when you were saying all this stuff, I was smiling as well. You are answering all the questions I had that I wanted to ask you. So honestly, brilliant conversation, guys. Thank you very much. So before we end our podcast, Daniel, I would like to know, so what's next for you? Yeah.
Well, so currently I'm doing sort of design consultancy. I work with another RCA friend, and we've just been doing sort of design consultancy for quite a while. We provide support to companies in product development and taking products to manufacture, or nowadays we are actually working in a lot of UI and UX as well. Just trying to reinvent how we the UX of AI first applications, which is a very interesting wave to ride the whole AI, and we're looking also into AI enabled hardware and things like that. So yeah, the innovation continues, and it's always been sort of driven by the design side of things. So whether it's product, UI, UX, whatever it is, it's all a constant innovation journey.
Daniel, I've loved hearing your story. I mean, everything that you're saying about your journey of various hardware startups that you've started through friendships, connections you've had with people, with investors, with customers, with clients, going out to the market, iterating a product, changing it, pivoting. It's exactly the ethos of what Blue Garage is about. So what we had after graduate or in the RCA, the Royal College of Art Industrial Design course, this really amazing, like privileged experience that we had. We continued for those first few years after, and we were bumping ideas off each other and sharing businesses. And then it sort of dissipates as people just sort of get on with their own lives. And we don't have that same environment community. You know, we QuickScreen set up its own manufacturing facility, as did Ikara, as did BuffaloGrid. And so we sort of went off in our own worlds. What we're doing here with Blue Garage is bringing that back, both for like, you know, older guys like us, but also for people that are coming straight out of university or people that, you know, have got these ideas and want to get involved in creative entrepreneurship. And so I'm just loving hearing your story, because I want to take the younger Daniel and put him here and see all of the amazing things that could be created for the big challenges that are out there now.
Yeah, no, like I could imagine being in a place like that when we were starting Buffalo or Arctica, and it would have been amazing. Yeah, definitely, I can see the value that your offering is providing to these new startups.
Cool. Dilly, say a bit about what your Synapse does, and then I guess we can wrap up.
Look, so with Synapse Labs, basically Synapse started back in Sri Lanka about 5 years ago now. And like I said, we just kept on doing products, just even the craziest stuff, just whatever we dreamt of, we built just out of pure passion. It was a very small team of 3, and then we evolved into taking on product like projects for other founders and other innovators as well, and help them build. So it's just sort of gradually, I think, evolved into what Synapse Labs is today. And well, this podcast is actually brought to you in partnership with Blue Garage and Synapse Labs. And Daniel, again, thank you very much, because very insightful conversation. Loved hearing how you told the story. Just lots to, I think, learn from for early stage founders like myself, like many others, I think, out there. So thanks heaps for joining us for our very first podcast as well. And
That's very welcome.
fantastic. For those of you who are listening, again, thanks for tuning in. again for our very first podcast. Very excited to get this going. One of the things, we're actually still in the process of locking down the official name for the podcast. So we actually figured we'd ask you, the listeners. So what should we call the pod? Drop your ideas, wherever, whatever platform you're listening to this from, just drop your ideas in the comments. And yeah, hopefully for the next second episode, we'll have an official name and solid branding to go with it. So yeah, that's what's up. And if you enjoyed this chat, of course, follow, subscribe for more real stories about hardware, funding, commercialization, and real stories, inspiring stories of people building things that matter. Until next time, thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.